Hi everyone, thanks for joining me for this Cypress in a Nutshell webcast. My name is Amir, one of the engineers on the Cypress team, and my goal for today is to help you get up and running with Cypress quickly, and to also give you a nice general overview of what the tool can do for you. We've got a lot to cover, so let's go ahead and get started. Now, before we get down to the nitty-gritty details, let's take a quick minute to talk about what Cypress is. Many of you probably already have an idea, but for those that are just getting acquainted, let's take a quick second. First and foremost, Cypress is a tool for reliably testing anything that runs in a web browser. It especially shines with testing modern web applications like the ones written in React, Vue, and Angular, and so on. But it's important to mention that Cypress is completely tech stack agnostic. It doesn't matter how and what you've written your app in. If it runs in the browser, the goal of Cypress is to help you test it. And best of all, Cypress is free and open source under the MIT license. You can do with it as you wish, fork it, it's open source. But even more importantly is the mission and the goal of Cypress. Any good project should have a solid mission backing it. And the goal of Cypress is to not just be another testing tool. The mission is to create a testing experience that's truly enjoyable and will make you actually want to write tests. We want to foster a productive ecosystem that actually champions a process that actually works. Now let's take a look at some of the non-technical reasons of why you would consider adopting Cypress. We'll get to the technical reasons later on in the presentation, but for now, let's just look at the non-technical ones. Well, Cypress has been growing in popularity fairly rapidly. Currently, the Cypress repository has over 13,000 stars on GitHub and is also being downloaded over 530,000 times on a weekly basis from NPM. And as I said, this growth has been fairly rapid. Last year, we came out of beta and we've been seeing hockey-style growth. This is actually a graph of how the GitHub stars have been progressing. Another awesome thing that happened recently was that ThoughtWorks Technology Radar identified Cypress as the #1 tool to adopt. Now, this technology radar, what it does is that it follows the maturation of a piece of technology over time, and they assess, how things are going as the technology is progressing. And it was great to see Cypress identified as the #1 tool to adopt, especially in comparison to other great testing tools like Test Cafe and Puppeteer. We're also seeing a growing demand for testing skills, specifically Cypress skills within the job market. And this is by no accident. There's now more demand than ever to create very polished user experiences. So any time spent learning Cypress is time well spent. I should also mention that Cypress is a sustainable open source project. Since it's popular, we receive a lot of feedback from the community. Our issues section is filled with great contributions, feedbacks, discourse. There's a lot of good conversations going on there, and we're always open to more. But more importantly, Cypress, the project, is backed by Cypress.io, the company, which consists of a team that's laser focused on creating the absolute best testing tool for the industry. These are folks that come in every day and are absolutely focused on hearing our users and developing new features. Okay, now you've heard a little bit about what Cypress is and why you might want to adopt it. Now it's time to dive in and start using it. First and foremost, let's talk about setup and installation. Well, it's very simple with Cypress. All you got to do is npm install Cypress. It's just this one line. There's no additional tools or binaries or anything else to set up or configure. This is it. You do this and you get one tool that handles everything for you. Once you do that, you're going to get two things. You're going to get the Cypress Desktop App. This is the Cypress GUI that you will use in your day-to-day workflow. And you will also get the Cypress CLI tool, which you will use to start Cypress, but also to run Cypress within your CI environment. And we'll see how these two programs work throughout this presentation. Let's talk about the Cypress Desktop App first. Well, how do we open it? Cypress is a binary in your node module, so you can use npx to call the Cypress open command to bring up Cypress. And when you do that for the very first time, especially in a fresh clean new project, Cypress is going to scaffold the Cypress directory, which includes all the various directories that are Cypress specific, which you can fill to configure and modify the behavior of Cypress. And we'll get to these directories in a little bit. For example, the Cypress scaffolding looks like this. Within this Cypress folder that gets placed in the top of your project directory, you're going to have a fixtures folder, an integration folder, a plugins folder, and a support folder. As I said, we'll get to talk about these specific directories, but the integration folder is the most important one here because that's the one you're going to be putting your test files into. And don't worry if you don't like the naming of this folder because it's fully configurable. Okay, so this is how the Cypress Desktop GUI looks like. When you bring it up, it's going to show you a list of all the test files within your Cypress integration or test file directory. And you can go ahead and start using it by clicking one of the test spec files here. So for us, we're going to click on that first spec file, action spec.js, and let's see what happens. Well, when you do that, Cypress is going to bring up a full version of Chrome, and this is how the Cypress test runner looks like. We're going to bring in your app and start running all the tests that you have written in that spec file. This is how the experience looks like. But let's break it apart and look at its various traits. So on the right-hand side is your app. Your app gets pulled in within an iframe. And everything else you see is, the Cypress test runner. In the left-hand side, we have the Cypress command log, which shows every single test within your spec file. And if you click on one of these tests, it will show you every single command that took place within that test. So everything that happened within your test, you can see right here within the command log. And the cool part here, and this is one of my personal favorite features, it's this ability to time travel throughout your test as you're scrubbing your mouse or selecting one of the commands within the command log. Cypress takes a DOM snapshot after every single action it takes, so you can easily travel through the actions that your test took to see the state of your app at that point in time. This is not just fun to watch, but immensely helpful for seeing what your tests are actually doing and very useful when you're debugging. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the Cypress API. And this is one of the reasons Cypress is a joy to use, because the API is very intuitive and almost English-like. Let's go ahead and look at some examples on how we use it. Well, you can access the Cypress API via this CY global that's made available within your test file. So you can do cy.mycommand to use a Cypress command. And this is all very well documented in our docs, which the link is there right here for you. So let's take a look at an example. We can use this get command to get an element on the page, for example, a button. And once we get this button, we can make actions against it and also make assertions against it. So for example here, I'm getting the button, I'm clicking the button, then I'm making an assertion that this button now has a particular class. This is a simple use case, but you can do even more advanced things like making a request against an API endpoint, then grabbing the response body and making an assertion against that response body. Cypress commands are very easy and simple to use, but their functionality is actually very rich. So they typically accept multiple types of arguments that expand their potential use cases. The important thing to point out about the Cypress API is that it's a chaining API and handles a subject that gets passed through this chain. So let's clarify that a bit. So when I use this get command to grab that button element, the button element becomes the subject, and this subject is going to get passed through this chain of commands that you can use to manipulate the subject and make assertions towards it. The other important thing to know about the Cypress API, and this is very critical and one of the biggest differentiating factors about Cypress. when you're typing, Cypress tests, when you're writing Cypress tests, Cypress is not going to imperatively execute the commands that you are telling it. What it's going to do is it's actually going to make, to put it simplistically, a to-do list of everything you asked of it. And it's going to run everything you've asked of it in the order you've asked of it, in the exact order you've asked of it. So things are going to run in a deterministic manner. And this is very important because determinism is crucial to accomplishing flake-freeness in your tests. Another thing to know about the Cypress API, and this is one of the things I really love about it, is it has this ability to automatically wait when making assertions. So for example, when we click this button and then we make this assertion that it has this class, Cypress is going to automatically wait for this particular assertion to come to life within the DOM. I don't have to add any waits or sleeps or anything like that in my tests anymore, because Cypress will automatically check the state of the world in my app to see if this assertion will pass or not. And by default, the assertions, we wait for them for 4 seconds. This is a pragmatic time, but it's fully configurable. Okay, so now we've dived in a bit, but let's go ahead and dive in deeper. Okay, so to explore some key concepts, and just for this webcast, I've written this example application. I call it Birdboard. It's a simple to-the-crud client that no one needs and no one ever asked for, but it's really going to help us explore some concepts here. This app is written in Vue. It's backed by an Express backend. It has a little API behind it, and the data is stored in a Mongo database. But as I mentioned earlier, is that Cypress is completely agnostic to your tech stack. So this is all just for this example. And this Birdboard app is like many other applications. It has a way for users to sign up and for users to log in. And these are typically very critical paths in our application. If they don't work, then many other things won't work within the app. So it's very important that we test these paths for our users. Okay, so how can we go ahead and accomplish this with Cypress? Well, we can go ahead and write a test for our sign up and login process. We can start things off by using the Cypress visit command to first visit the sign up page. Then once we've done that, we want to go ahead and drive the UI of our sign up form to register our first user. So we'll go ahead and use the get command to grab the email input box of the sign up form, and then we can type in our email. We'll do the same thing for the password fields. We can use the type command to type in things into input boxes, and then we can grab the sign up button using its ID as the selector for the element, and then we can use the click command to click that button and to finish the sign up process. Now, once the user signs up, they're going to get directed to the login page so they can log in. I know this is annoying. Usually when people sign up, they automatically get logged in, but this is just for the sake of demonstration. So to ensure that the user has successfully moved from the sign up process to the login page, we can check the address bar and the current location of the user within our app, and we can use the location command to get some information about the user's current location within the app, and we can grab the path name of their current URL, and then we can make the assertion that the path name is the login page. And we can make these assertions using this should command. There are various ways to make assertions that are well documented in our documentation, but you will see us using this should command to make quick and snappy assertions. Now, once we've logged in the user, we've landed on the login page, we want to log in the user, and we can do the same process as we did with the sign up page, which is type in our email address using the type command, and then clicking that login button. And once we've logged in, we're going to make the assertion that we've successfully landed on the board page, which is the main page of the app where you can see all the tweets coming in. Okay, so and this is how it looks like. This is a video of it, and it's in a loop, so we can first see that we are signing up the user and we're logging in. Then we're landing on the main page of the app, and then as you can see, this is running very fast. Cypress is very fast. It is going to run things very quickly because it runs right alongside your application. Okay, so I run this test once, everything seems to be passing, but then I run it again and it's not passing. So this is a bit confusing. And Cypress is communicating that to me. It's saying that, my assertion to check that the user has moved from successfully moved from the sign up page to a login page is failing. And I can see this is happening after I make a post request to the sign up API endpoint, which is responding with a 400, and Cypress is showing that to me in the command log. Well, how can I go about debugging this? Well, I can go ahead and click on that post request within the Cypress command log. And if I actually bring up DevTools, Cypress is going to output additional information about that request, almost everything you need to know about that request within the DevTools command log. And this is, again, very useful for debugging. But I think I know what's going on here. So I'm running my test, I'm creating that user, and then I'm trying to rerun the test by creating that same user, and my backend is not responding properly because that user already exists. With the email Amir@Cypress.io, this user already exists. Now I could do a lot better job of communicating that in my front end, and that's another story. But right now, my tests are not cleaning up after themselves. When they're getting ran multiple times. So I need to handle that. How can I go about doing this? Well, Cypress has this task command, and this task command allows me to run, JavaScript at the system level. So your tests generally are going to be running within the browser. They take actions against your app that's running within the browser, and Cypress Test Runner runs alongside your application. It runs within the same run loop as your application. But if I use the task command, I can actually run JavaScript at the system level. And the reason I'm able to do this is that Cypress also has a node server component, this node backend component, which can execute my code on the system. So let's go ahead and see how I can use this task command to clean up after my first test. Well, I can clean up by clearing my database. I can have this utility, from my server, just this general purpose clear database function I wrote. And then I can call that function within a task that I can declare. This is how you declare tasks. This is done within the plugins directory. And remember, this is one of the folders that Cypress originally scaffolded when I first started up Cypress. So I can call this command clear db, and this is just a general purpose function. It can accept arguments and return whatever. But for this example over here, I'm just going to call that clear database function to clear my database, and this is going to go ahead and make a request to my MongoDB to clear it up. So now that I've declared this task, how can I go ahead about using it within my test? Well, we can simply call the task command within the before each hook of our test. So before each time this test starts, we're going to clear our database. That's it. Done. Great. So how can we go about optimizing this test further? Well, I see this section, lines 16 through 18. This is all just for logging in the user. And login is a pretty common thing you have to do when you're testing your application. My colleagues that are working with me on this project will want to probably, also log in within their test. So it would be really nice if I can encapsulate the login actions into a login command that everybody else can also use, and it just really cleans up the test here. So how can we go about declaring custom commands? And this is the end goal here, by the way, to have this custom login command where we can pass in, the user's credentials and we just log in. So the way we can accomplish this is by using the Cypress Global, which offers this commands API, and we can add commands to it just like you're seeing here on the screen. And the place that we declare this is within the commands file that's located within the support directory in your Cypress folder. So we can declare this custom login command. It's going to accept an email and a password. And again, this is just a general purpose function. And then we can move those actions we had earlier into this function to encapsulate this logic. So now, great, things are looking better. How can we go about furthering this test further? Well, the other component of this test was the sign up process. It's great to have this test so we can drive our UI and gain confidence that our UI is properly interacting with our backend and everything is fine. But signing up is also a thing that happens quite often. But we only need to run the test against the UI once, gain confidence in it. But it's not very efficient to do this over and over and over again. It would be great if the user was already properly provisioned in the database, so I can go ahead and go on with the rest of my tests. And you usually need some users in place to do most of your tests, typically anyways. So how can we go about accomplishing this? Well, we can go back to our trusty friend, the task command, and we can declare a new task. And I'm going to declare a task for seeding the database. I have this, the seed database function, in my server code base, and this is simply going to provision the user that we were creating not manually, but by driving the UI to create it. So we're just going to call this function to seed our database to just have a user ready when our test starts. Once we do this, in our before each hook, we can call this seeddb task, and we can pass in the user data that we want here, but just passing in like a we can store this information in like a dedicated file that that includes details about seed users or so on. There's various ways of accomplishing this, but the important thing to notice is that task commands can accept arguments for those functions that we've declared earlier. Great. So now we are clearing our database and seeing our database properly, and we can see everything run now all together very efficiently. Great. So but we can go one step further, and this is going to highlight another great benefit of Cypress. So let's move our old login command and rename it login with UI, because there's another way to accomplish this. We can actually log in programmatically. Remember that Cypress, again, runs right alongside your application. It runs within the same run loop as your application, which means it has direct programmatic access to your app. You can use the same code that your app uses within your test, and this is immensely useful. So, to make the login process even more efficient, I can directly call the function that does the login within my application right here in this custom login command. And the way I can do this is, I can attach the instance of my app to the global window of the browser, and then I can just use the window command of Cypress to access that global app instance. And I'm using Vuex as the central state management of this application, and if you don't know what that is, it's okay. It's just similar to kind of Redux if you're coming from the React world, but generally put, it's just a way to handle state within your app. And since I have access to this part of my application, I can dispatch that login functionality directly, programmatically. And this isn't just something to look at and then move on to the next slide. We should really take pause here, because I'm getting the chance to use the code I've written that explains and implements the functionality of my application, and I can reuse it within my test. This is going to give me even a higher level of confidence in my end-to-end tests. So over here, again, accepting, an email password, I'm going to dispatch the login action I have implemented in my application to programmatically log in my user. Okay, and again, this is how the Birdboard app looks like. You can type in some, your favorite hashtags, and it will kind of aggregate all the tweets regarding all the hashtags you've entered in that top input box. Great. So let's explore some other concepts here. So far, we are clearing our database, we're seeding our database, then we're visiting our login page. Since we've seeded our database properly, there's already a user there, so we can just go ahead and log in, and we can do that via our custom login command. But now let's go ahead and test the actual app. Okay, so the way the app works is that when you first load the page, it's going to make a request to this /tweets endpoint, and it's going to grab the tweets that we want to see regarding the hashtags that we have. So in the back end, requests are actually being made to the Twitter API, and this is a third-party API. Generally speaking, you don't want to, test those raw APIs in your test environment. You usually, expect that these third-party APIs work. There's this contract that, hey, I don't control this system. I am a user of this system. So there's this general expectation that things are going to work, and this is generally a sound practice. Though there are cases where you will want to test third-party APIs. But generally, you don't want to do that because you don't control that system. And this is a great opportunity to introduce stubbing. So we can stub the response of our tweets endpoint. How can we go about doing this in Cypress? Well, we can start things off by using the Cypress server command. This is going to initiate a server for us to pass our request to that's going to enable stubbing. Then we can use the Cypress route command, and we can describe what we want the response of the tweets endpoint to be. So the first argument is the request method type, and in this case, we're going to make a GET request to the tweets endpoint, and we want the response to be the set of tweets. Now, where are we storing these tweets? Well, we can use fixtures to describe what the response should be, and you can store fixtures within the Cypress fixtures directory, which was one of the other directories that Cypress provisioned when we first started it up. And we can easily refer to the fixtures within our fixtures folder by using this pattern right here. We can refer to them just by strings. So we can say fixture : tweets, and the thing that comes after the colon is essentially the name of that JSON file. And there are various ways to handle fixtures, and we describe this all within our documentation. But this is one of the general purpose ways of accomplishing it. So again, the CUI route command is explaining how we want this API endpoint to be stubbed, and to refer to this route again in our tests, we can use this as command to essentially label this route. So we want to label this route as tweets, just giving it a name so we can refer to it later on. Great. So then we're going to drive the input box up top in our app to input some hashtags, and after we do that, we want to see the response of that get tweets endpoint. And the way we can do that is we can wait for that response to return. And the way we can do that is using the Cypress wait command. Now, remember, you could be saying, well, Amir, you said I don't really have to do waiting or anything like that in Cypress. Well, that's true. Generally, you don't have to. But this is a different type of waiting. We're waiting on this label, this labeled route to return, and we can do that by using this string pattern here, which is @tweets, and this is how we refer to that label I mentioned earlier chained off the Cypress route command, and we call these aliases. So we're waiting on the @tweets alias here, and this refers to the tweets endpoint. And once we do that, once that response is received from that request, then we can go ahead and make assertions against that response body. In this case, we're making sure that the length of all the data that we've received matches what we're seeing in the actual UI, what's rendered in the UI. This is how that test will look like. Now, when you're establishing routes to do stubbing, Cypress is actually going to show that to you in the command log as well. So if you notice up top here, it's going to show you, hey, we're stubbing this /tweets route. We're using the get method, and in fact, it is stubbed. And it's also showing you the alias that we're using to refer to it, and it's it's labeled in this nice yellow color, which makes it easy to follow throughout our tests. Now, the Cypress route command is actually more powerful. It has much more functionality, and I urge you to look up the documentation for it. But we can even do do other things to simulate problematic scenarios. So, for example, one of the big issues with making requests to an API endpoint is how long does it take to respond? Should we have a timeout? How should our app respond when things are not working properly? What if it's not getting the proper status? And so on. And this is all doable with the route command. So for example, I can use this delay option to simulate a 3-second delay in the response, and I can even set the status of the response to be a 404. And in this way, I can simulate that problematic scenario, and I can test if my app is handling it properly. So for example, we might want to show an error message or show a loading screen or so on. But this is all possible with the route command. And also notice that I'm handling fixtures a little differently here. In the previous test, I was referring to my tweets fixture with that string pattern, which is fixtures : tweets. But now I'm using the Cypress fixtures command to refer to it. So there are various ways to use fixtures here. Again, this is the whole test running. So again, I'm clearing the database, seeing the database, logging in, and testing my app fully. Okay, so now we've seen how to use Cypress in our day-to-day workflow via the Cypress Desktop App. But how do we run Cypress in CI? You can't run the desktop app, in CI. So how do you go about running Cypress headlessly? The way we can accomplish that is by using the Cypress run command. So when using Cypress in a headed manner, we're using the Cypress open command, and to run it headlessly, we use the run command. Now, when we do run Cypress in a headless manner, we do get automatic video recordings of the full test runs out of the box. And this is really helpful because when you're running browser tests in CI, you can't really see what's going on in a browser, right? It's all very visual. It's really nice to see a full video recording so you can easily see what took place, and especially when errors took place. Let's go ahead and take a look at how it all looks like. So again, we use the Cypress run command. We're running that action spec file we saw earlier, and Cypress is going to show you, all the tests that it's executing, how long they take, is going to show you the test results, and it's going to show you that video recording, which is just an MP4 file, but it's essentially everything you see in the browser, and it includes all the aspects of the test runner as well. Now this brings us to the other half of the Cypress story, which is the Cypress Dashboard. This is a purely optional and complementary service to the Cypress test runner. And what it allows you to do is report, or as we like to say, record your test run results to this dashboard. And it gives you much better introspection of what's going on in CI. And it's a much better collaboration point as well for your team. Let's go ahead and take a quick look. So this is how the Cypress dashboard looks like, and this is the view for the Cypress project itself. We use Cypress to test Cypress, and it's very similar to how CI provider apps might look like. In this case, we're showing you the recent test runs you've had, and we show you some Git commit history information, how long it took, how many tests passed, which ones didn't, references back to your CI provider, the context the test ran in, so like, which browser, which operating system, and so on. One thing I like to clarify with the dashboard service is that it's completely free for open source projects. We also have a very generous free plan, and so anybody can really get up and running with using this service. Let's learn a little bit about it. Once you click into one of these test runs, you get to see all the test spec files that ran. You can see the direct terminal output you're used to seeing when you're running the test headlessly. Just similar to how you would see things in CI as well. You can see that full video recording we just talked about, and you can share this with your colleagues. It's very helpful when debugging, and you can speed things up or download the video if you would like as well. So this is also very helpful for debugging scenarios. We were just looking at passing tests, and passing tests are very boring. What's more interesting is how we see things when things go wrong, and this is really where the dashboard shines, because it really organizes and presents error points and errors very nicely. So if we click on like this failures tab for this test run, we get to see each error that took place, get some more information about it, even see the full stack trace, and again, we have access to the direct terminal output, screenshots that took place, and also the video as well. So if we can actually click on on that error and see the screenshots that took place at that point in time, and Cypress automatically does this. It takes screenshots when things go wrong, and this again helps you with debugging problems. Now, the other aspect of the dashboard is it's pretty hidden. There's no UI for it. It's its ability to parallelize your test files. This is one of my favorite features, and it's one of the first things I worked on when I joined Cypress. And by just passing this parallel flag in, when you're running Cypress headlessly, Cypress will automatically figure out how to optimally load balance your test files across your CI machines. So if you have 10 CI machines provisioned in your environment, Cypress will optimally figure out how to distribute your test files across those machines. This is something that probably warrants its own full webcast, and if you're all interested, I would love to do one just on parallelization alone. Now, the other thing that I would really like to mention about Cypress is its documentation. This is something we're really proud of, and it's really one of the reasons why Cypress has become so successful. And if you're looking for a one-stop place to start learning Cypress, it's definitely the documentation. This isn't like what other documentations, software documentation you've seen in the past. It's not just a list of API commands. It's really a guide, and it's very prescriptive. We offer our opinions, our best practices, our thoughts on various matters, and we walk you through core concepts, and you can read it almost like a book. That's how I originally read it. And then once I went over the core concepts and some of the guides, that's when I went and explored the API itself. We also have this example recipes repo, which I urge everyone to check out. And this is packed with, tips, tricks, and recipes for how you would handle certain situations. This is especially helpful for figuring out how to do things, in common scenarios like logging in or so on. So I really urge everyone to check this out. It's packed with a lot of good information. And we also have a dedicated page to communicate our roadmap. We always get asked, what are you guys working on? What's in progress? What's down the line? And you can always refer to our roadmap page to check out our progress, see the status of things. We put links for the issues and pull requests of the things we're working on, and we offer this roadmap page for our test runner, but also the dashboard service as well. So if you have any questions about a roadmap, check this page out first, but if you have more questions, feel free to reach out. And Cypress, due to its popularity, and the reason why it's really popular is its community. We have a pretty active Gitter channel, so if you have any questions, hop on there, ask your questions. Someone is going to come help you out, either from the community or someone on the Cypress team. And if you have any problems with Cypress, find any issues or bugs, feel free to file an issue. We read everything, so I urge you to do that if you find any problems. And one thing I like to point out is that any successful technology, open source technology, I should say, is really owes its success to its community, and this is very true for Cypress. Cypress would not be where it's at today if it wasn't for all the feedback, the great debates, and just the overall passion people have for Cypress. So we really appreciate this, and we're going to be doing more and more to help grow the community and give back to our community as well. With that said, this concludes this webcast. Thanks for joining me. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, or feel free to shoot me an email. I'll be glad to help you out. Again, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you on the next webcast. Thank you. Bye-bye.